In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up WinCC Client Server the correct way. So if you have struggled with getting Client Server to work properly, then you're watching the right video. Now, when I talk about Client Server, this is where you have a multi-user project running on a PC with WinCC, that's your WinCC server, and then other WinCC stations will connect to the server project as clients. Now, there is no project required to be on the client machine. I know that there's a type of project called a client project. That's not for client server. That is for multi-server, which I will cover in an upcoming video. The WinCC clients can view and interact with all screens, alarms, and trends in both runtime as well as configuration. So from a WinCC client, you can change screens, create screens, add tags, and things like that, just as if you were on the server. You do have to have a license. We'll talk about licensing a little later. Now, I have a task list that I generally go through when I'm setting up client server. We're going to go through it here. Later in the video, I'm going to give you this list, so be sure to watch until the end of the video. I'm going to take WinCC out of runtime. And we're going to start on the WinCC server, and then you're going to do these steps for the server and all the clients before we go forward. And so first, we're going to make sure that we are logged on with an account that has administrative privileges. This is really important because the administrator should be in the SIMATIC HMI user group, and the administrator should have full access to the WinCC project directory. So it's going to be pretty important to make sure that you have a user. So let's take a look at the user that we're using. I'm going to pull up my control panel. We'll go to System and Security, Administrative Tools, Computer Management, and then under Local Users and Groups, I happen to be logged on as admin, and admin is a member of both SIMATIC HMI and administrators. So we're in good shape here. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that all of your computers have to use the same username and password. That does make it easy, but you do want to have a username and password with administrator rights that exist on all the PCs, and you don't necessarily have to be logged on as this user on the server, but the client can use it to get access to the project directory, and we'll talk about that when we get to the client. The next thing that you're going to do is take a look at your WinCC version. All of the versions need to be on the same version. That means service pack and update. On this machine, I've got WinCC version 8 and update 4 or K8004. So all of your clients need to have this same exact version on there. So we will just make a note on that. If you do find a client that is not fully updated, you need to update that before you proceed. The next thing that we need to do is take a look at our PC name. We'll just go to this PC and properties. This PC name is short and sweet. It's just called Bob's Dev. You do not want any dashes or illegal characters in this name, or it may affect how client server works. I have seen dashes cause problems like the screens on the runtime client are just completely gray. Once I took the dash out, then it took care of it. I do have a link for you that you can look at what the legal characters are for WinCC. I'll put this link in the comments, and they give you the rules, specifications for computer names. They give you the illegal characters. And let's just go down to computer names. These are the illegal characters, also the space characters. It does not list a dash, but dashes will cause problems with client server. So if you have a dash in the name, please remove it. Ironically, when you create a new Windows PC, if you don't immediately change it, it will have a dash in it, and this will cause problems. You also want to make sure that the computer name is not longer than 15 characters because this will also cause a problem. Now, another thing that will trip you up is if the PC name was changed after WinCC was installed. But I have created a video. I'm going to put a link up here as well as at the end of the video. You can safely change the computer name. And if you're not sure, if you are not the one that set this up, and if you're not sure the PC name has been changed, there is a quick check that you can do. That is also in the video I'm going to link to. And so if you're completely unsure, you should watch that video. Or if you have to rename a PC for a client server, take a look at that video and it'll show you how to do it safely. The next thing that you want to do is make sure that all your computers are on the same time zone and the time is the same. Time synchronization is a great idea. I am set to the Eastern United States time zone, so I'll make sure on all my clients that the time zone is the same. Believe me, this does matter. Now let's take a look at our network. I am going to open File Manager and I'm just going to type in SIMATIC SHELL. And this gives me a lot of information. If you've ever noticed that every time you create a project in WinCC, it creates a network share. That is for client server and it is also for multi-server. And that's why it does it. So you can see I've got quite a few projects here. You can look at this in different ways. So if we right click here, I can see what my domain looks like or my work group. I can show my IP segments and things like that. In order for client server to work, we have to turn on remote connection. So I'm going to just right click here and go to settings. And here I'm going to pick out which Ethernet adapter that I'm going to use, which is this. And I've got remote communication checked. If that's not checked, you need to go ahead and check it. And when you do, it is going to set encrypted communication and you can put in a security key. If you do use a security key on this, and the way you do it is you just check this and put in a key, all of your computers should have the exact same PSK on it, or again, they won't be able to communicate. So for simplicity, I've just disabled encrypted communication for this video. But make sure that remote communication is checked and make sure you have the correct network adapter, which is just going to be your SCADA LAN for your plant. And then just click OK. And then once you highlight your computer, you should see your IP address and your class and also your domain. Next, I want to open up a command prompt and just make sure that I can ping my other computers. So my client computer is called IQ Client, and instead of putting the IP address, I'm going to put the name, and this just tests whether or not I have domain name recognition. DNS is set up. If you cannot ping by name and you can ping by IP, you can make an entry in your host file by going to your C drive and then go to your Windows directory and then to System32, drivers, etc for etc. And then you're going to look at your host file. And what I've done is you can see that I have an entry for my IQ client. I also have another development computer called BobsDev SB2. Notice that there's a dash in there. So if I were using this, I would need to get rid of that dash if it's going to participate in client server. So you have to pull this file out of this directory, edit it, and put it back in. The last thing that I'm going to do is I will open File Manager back up and I'll just go to Network. I will make sure that I can see all of the clients participating, and if I can double click on there and log in, and again you're going to be using the account that has access to SIMATIC HMI. I'm going to log on, and if I put in the correct credentials, I should see my WinCC project shares. So as long as you're able to do this and your network is set up correctly. Now, since I had to log in with the administrator account, that's the account I'm going to use on the client. That account does exist on the client. That is why I was able to do this. So from IQ Client, we're going to do the same thing back from the server and be logged on as administrator. So as long as the account exists in both places, we should be able to do this. Now we're going to head on over to the client, and I am just using a virtual machine here. The name of this computer is IQ Client. I did have to change this when I was setting up this video, and I showed this in another video showing you how to change the PC name. You really need to watch that in case you need to check if the PC name has been changed or if you're having problems setting up client server. So I am going to close this. We've already set the PC name. Let's check our username. I will show you if I go into Control Panel and System and Security, Administrative Tools, go into Computer Management, and under Local Users, I am logged on as administrator. We can see that right here. And administrator is a member of SIMATIC HMI and administrator, so we're good there as well. Next, I'm going to open up WinCC Control Center, and I'm just going to do Help About. It does have the exact same WinCC version, WinCC V8 Update 4, so we are good there. We already know our PC name is good, and I have checked previously that it has been changed, so I've updated it. And we are set in the same time zone here. I have the same time on both computers. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to open up SIMATIC SHELL. I can see that IQ Client's there. I've only got one project here called Hello World. So I am going to right-click on SIMATIC SHELL, go to Settings. This is not set up for remote communication, so I'm going to check this. I won't use a PSK. We decided we're going to use unencrypted. And so if I say OK there, now, since I have enabled this, notice that I see Bob's Dev, which has all of my WinCC projects on. I can also see my own. So that is a really good sign that we're kind of in good shape. The next thing I'm going to do is pull up a command prompt. I am going to ping Bob's Dev by name. It does ping. So this is really good news. If you are not able to do this and or you don't see SIMATIC SHELL acting like this after you've enabled remote communications, then you need to fix those first before proceeding, because client server is just not going to work. And of course, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'll go to network. And I do see my server. I can double click because I am logged on as administrator and I have that same account on my server machine. Even though I'm not logged on as that user on the server machine, I have full access to this because it's using pass-through authentication. So if you can do this and your SIMATIC SHELL is working correctly and you can ping by name, you should be good to go. And I think we're ready to set up the server project to do client server. So we're back on the server. I'm just going to use my step-by-step project. Hopefully you've gone through that free training. If not, check out the WinCC V8 or V7.4 playlist on this YouTube channel. Now I'm going to right-click here and go to Properties, and this particular project is set up as a single user project. So I have to change it to a multi-user project, and in this case, a multi-user means a computer and not a person. And so if I change this to a multi-user project, then I need to have a server license on the server in order to be able to use this without getting the nag message. So I'm going to change this to a multi-user project. I'm going to click OK. It's going to come back, tell me it's going to update the startup list. That's fine. I click yes. And now it tells me I have to close the project and reopen it for it to take effect. I will click OK. And then we'll just do File Close. And we just go to Recent File and reopen it. And now we have a multi-user project. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add our clients. I'm just going to right-click and do Open. It's going to open my computer properties, and you can see here I've got Bob's Dev, which is my server. Let's just go ahead and open this all the way up so that we can see it. And I am just going to enter in, and I like to use all uppercase, IQ Client. This is the name of my client PC, and basically it's telling you, okay, if you're going to add clients, the Windows Group SIMATIC HMI needs full access authorization to the project directory. If I click yes, then WinCC will handle this for us, and I'll just click yes. And it tells us, okay, this is a WinCC client here, and we can set some properties. It's going to ask me which start picture do I want. So in client server, you can have different pictures for start picture on each client, and that makes sense because maybe the client's had a station and you only want to show the interface for that station. Now for this, I have created a client main, and it's got less buttons and it's just completely different than main, so that you can tell we're actually doing client server when you see this. And there's some other settings here. You can also get to this dialog just by doing right-click properties here. I'm a little more familiar with this because this is the way it's been, but we look at our startup. Notice that global script, alarm logging, tag logging, user archives are all grayed out. That's because the server is running all of these and the client will just connect to it. So you don't have a separate global script runtime or alarm logging runtime. The server is managing this all. So don't fret about it. We do have graphics runtime because that is a local service. And if you're using the cloud or REST service, then those also run on the client. And we can look at our parameters. And here you can see we've set up our start picture for client main. We can set up our window. I like to turn on title, border, and adapt picture. If you're using menus and toolbars, you can set up the default one there. And I'll just click OK. So taking a quick look at our client main, and I'll also open our regular main just so you can kind of see the difference. So here's our regular main. So this is what will come up on the server when we go to runtime. The client main, what I've done is I've taken some buttons away. I put a big thing here that says client station, and I've put an IO field here that is connected to one of the internal tags, and you can tell that it's a system tag because it starts with local machine name. So that tag always has the name of the computer which this screen is running. So you can show what client you're on using this tag. There's also an server name, so you can tell what the name of the server is. So with that, I am just going to go back to WinCC Explorer. And finally, on the server, we want to go to server data, right click and do create, and just leave this stuff at default and click OK. And so I'm just going to go to runtime on the server, and you can see that this is the server start screen. I need to log on here, so I'll just log on. So the next thing that we need to do before we connect up with our client is go into the user administrator, and we're going to look at our user engineer. And you're going to have to log in from the client using that. And it has to have these rights: activate remote and configure remote. Configure remote allows this user to make changes and open the project on the client. The activate remote allows the client to remotely activate the project on the server. So you have to know a username or password or create one that has these rights in order to connect from the client. So we have that. I've got engineer, and we can now go to our client and set up. I'm going to go back over to my client computer. We are going to do file open, and we're going to go to network, and we're going to find our server. That's Bob's Dev. And you can see I've got pass-through access to the WinCC project folder. That's why WinCC shares these projects from the server, so we can do this. And we're going to go find our project. So I'm just going to scroll down here. It should be the WinCC project V8 step-by-step. I will go into that folder, find the MCP file, and click open. Now it's going to try to connect, and a lot of people make the mistake of trying to put in a Windows login here. No. You've got to put in the WinCC user, and we were using engineer and putting in my password. Click OK. And as long as that user has configuration rights to this project, it is going to open it just as if the project were local. So this is a very good sign here. Because the server is in runtime, it's automatically going to go to runtime, but it's going to use the settings of IQ Client. So that means we're going to get a different start screen here. And the runtime screen comes up, and I can navigate. Of course, I have to log in. So just because we logged in as engineer in configuration to open the project doesn't mean that it's automatically logged in to runtime. So we're going to log into runtime. We can see the different screens here, and here this is the server, and I'm just going to move some stuff around so that we can kind of see both of these at the same time. Of course, it's going to be some overlap, so I'll just kind of minimize this. So this is my client, and of course it moves independent to the server. However, if I go to the overview screen, if I change the level here, you'll see them both change. Also notice that my @local machine has IQ Client because that's the name of the local computer, so we can tell what computer we're on. And when I do control or do user interface functions, of course they don't affect the others, and that's because these are all local. Of course, if I start this motor here, of course, because we're going to a tag, you'll see that the motor indicates started over here on the server. So it's completely independent. You can have up to 32 of these clients in your process in addition to the server. You can also have redundant servers, which I will cover in another video. And I want to show you a couple of other things on the client and the server before we finish this video. And what I'm going to do is just take the client out of runtime, and I am just going to close the project here on the client. Now, of course, the server is still running, and shutting down the client does not affect that. Now, the project is closed. Let's say that you want to start up the project on the client, but you don't want to open WinCC Explorer. You can do that through your shell. So I will just go to my shell tray here. You see the WinCC. I can right click on this and just choose Open Project. It's already looking at the client server project, which is the last project, so I'll just select the MCP file. And then of course I do have to log in. You might expect for a control center to come up, but it just opens the project in the background, and then we can go back here and do Activate Runtime. And it will just go to runtime, and I don't have Control Center running, which is good. You may not want to have people access that. You may not want to run it, especially if you only have a runtime license. And so now we go back to runtime, and I'll just log in here, click OK. And one other thing I want to show you, I'm just going to go back to the server, and under Tools, Status of Client Connections, I can see that IQ Client is online and it is in runtime because of the green icon here. Now, if I go back to my VMware and I open this, and I'm going to right click. Now there's two things here, exit graphics runtime and deactivate runtime. Exit graphics runtime just turns off the user interface, but as you can see from the right pointing triangle, that tells me we're still in runtime, and then you can start it back. So that's just turning graphics runtime on and off. But that's not the same as deactivating it. And you can see I'm still logged on here, so it was just paused. Now if I right click and deactivate runtime, now it's actually deactivating. If I go back to the server, you see the icon is now changed. It's no longer green. I can look at that and tell you that this client is connected, but it is not in runtime here. Now, if I close the project, then it will disappear. It's worth noting that there is also a tag here. We have connected RT client, and I've shown the value here. You can do this just by unhiding the value, which already had it open, but this will tell you how many clients are connected. So if we go back and we're going to right click, activate runtime, it's going to come into runtime. And then if we go back to our tags, you can see there is now a 1. So I can use that tag to tell me how many clients are connected. Of course, if I go back here and do status of client connections, then IQ client is back. So one last thing I'd like to show you is that you can make changes on the client as long as you have a configuration license. So this is my client. I have Graphics Designer open to our overview screen, and I could make changes here. So here I'll just select this, and we're going to change the color of the text. Maybe I can make it black, and then I can hit save. And then over here on the server, if I just leave that page and come back, then you see this font is now black. So I can make changes to alarms, tags, trends, anything as long as I have a configuration license. Okay guys, that's a wrap on WinCC Client Server. I hope you learned something. If you like this video, please share it with your colleagues. Consider subscribing to this channel or becoming a member for member perks like being able to download projects, source codes, and notes. And take a look at our playlist. I have a complete free training series on WinCC 7.4 and 8.0 called Step by Step, as well as WinCC Unified v17. There's also a WinCC database course programming class on Udemy, and you can look in the comments of this video for links. I really appreciate you watching, and I will see you soon.